Hello RWBY fans, welcome to the first installment on my channel that I'm calling RWBY Debunked, where we are going to take certain criticisms from certain individuals within the fandom and put a different light on them and hopefully explain certain things that they find confusing. The subject for today's episode, as you can see by the title, is Mr. Vexed Viewer. Now, if you've been in the RWBY fandom for any amount of time, the name Vexed Viewer, you know this name very well. Now, whether that is a good or bad thing in your mind, that is up to you to decide. I personally have no personal problems with Vexed at all. However, when it comes to his views on RWBY, I find them to be questionable and different, and we're going to talk about that as we get into it. Now, let me preface this entire video by saying, no, this video was not made out of malicious intent or to be petty or to be a yelling fanboy or anything like that. This video is made because I want to explain why certain criticisms don't always make sense when being discussed in RWBY. And we'll get into that, because this video in particular, we're going to be discussing Vexed's video entitled Stupid for the Sake of Plot 3.0. We're going to go through point by point and see if his criticisms hold any merit, or if he's making a mountain out of a molehill. We will find out very soon. So, let's get into it. Now, this entire video is built upon the main cast's plan within the finale of Volume 8, and his issues that he sees with the plan. And like I said before, we're going to go through point by point and really dissect what is being discussed here. So, let's start with point number 1, portals. Vexed has issues with the way Ambrosius constructs the portals and says that the central location was pointless. Normally, I would agree with a plan like this being very overly complicated when it doesn't really need to be. Until you realize that Ambrosius tells Team RWBY why the central location is needed in the first place. You see, in the video in question, Vexed plays this clip.
Fine.
Can you make a bunch of doorways in Atlas that open at a single spot in Vacuo?
But conveniently forgets to mention that Ambrosius says this in response. Sure, I just need coordinates and specs for each door, a reason for bending spacetime to account for the greater foot traffic on one side, and a single point of exit on the other. Now, is this plan overly complicated? Yes. But is there also a reason given as to why it has to be complicated? Yes. Because Ozpin literally tells us the chapter before the plan, or during the plan actually, that Ambrosius has the power to create anything in the world. He can create anything you want, as long as you tell him how. So when he responds to Team RWBY saying, I need specs and coordinates for each door and an explanation for bending spacetime to account for the greater foot traffic on one side and a single point of exit on the other, he's saying that unless you can point for point explain how this can happen, you need to have a buffer in the middle in order for it to work. Otherwise, can't do it. It doesn't work. It wouldn't be viable. And they already have the real world example, because we see in the episode that they base it off of snowshoe shipping from episode 2. It's very straightforward. Is it complicated? Yes. But the explanation is there if you look for it. So, if you look at their plan and call it stupid for the sake of plot happening, you have your reason as to why you might come to that conclusion. Next point. Point 2. Cinder. Now, Vexed has made his hatred for Cinder abundantly clear for a very long time. However, this point isn't about Cinder herself, but rather the main cast's not taking her into account in their plan. Here's the thing, though. The central location was the first time anyone in the main cast besides Penny saw Cinder in Volume 8. She's been in The Whale, on Amity, and in Atlas, but never around Team RWBY or Team Juniper. Also, he brings up that Emerald could have warned them about Cinder, but here's the thing. The villain's plan for the Winter Maiden powers wasn't to go to the vault. It was to get Watts to deliver Penny to Monstra because they misunderstood Watts' message as seen in Chapter 10. In Chapter 10, Cinder tells Watts, "I thought you said you have control over Penny," and Watts responds saying, "I said I have Penny under control, not that I can telekinetically force her to do whatever I want." So the plan was to never be directly involved in the conflict. It was to bring everything to Salem within Monstra and just have everything happen all at once. Obviously that didn't happen, so Cinder had to improvise, and when she learned what they were planning from Jin, she went with her plan. So bringing up the fact that they didn't take Cinder into account makes perfect sense for the narrative to happen, because they had no reason to believe that she would have been a problem during this plan. Remember, Volume 8 takes place over 48 hours, 2 days. In that entire time, the last time any of the main cast saw Cinder was in Freya's room when Penny became the Winter Maiden. RWBY blasted her with her silver eyes, she jetted up through the roof, and they didn't see her at all after that until they were in the central location about to go to Vacuo. So, in their mind, with everything else going on with Ironwood and the evacuation and the Happy Huntresses and trying to get everything to happen all at once in a very short amount of time, there was no reason for them to consider that Cinder could still potentially be a threat. We as the audience knew that because we saw her the entire volume planning and doing things, but the main cast had no reason to have that knowledge. It wouldn't have made sense for them to all of a sudden have this knowledge that Cinder is still around and still plotting things, because they didn't know. They would have no way to know because she wasn't there. Anyway, next point. Point 3. Jean. Vex mentions that he didn't like the fact that Jean didn't go to Vacuo with Oscar, Ren, and Emerald, since, he can boost aura, which would have been helpful for Ren. I think this is more of a matter of what the characters did do, rather than what they didn't do. Let me explain. The entire plan was split into 2 parts with the 2 teams. Team RWBY goes to the vault, saves Penny from the virus, and makes the portals to Vacuo, while Team Juniper alerts everyone that Atlas will begin to fall and get through the portals. Going off the last point, the main cast did not know what the villains were doing in tandem with their plan, so they weren't expecting Watts disabling the CCT tower and Cinder going into the central location and causing that explosion. After that happened, they had to go warn people on foot and escort the citizens themselves. Also, Jean and Nora made the most sense to stay behind and help when you consider that they had no way of knowing that going through the portal to Vacuo would put them in the middle of the dust storm. If not for the storm, Ren could have easily masked everyone's emotions long enough for them to walk to the CCT center and make sure everyone was secure inside the building before going back out and assisting the huntsmen and huntresses of Vacuo. It was a lot of unknown variables that they didn't account for. It wasn't just Cinder that really made their plan fail. It wasn't just that, they didn't take everything into account, so of course they were going to fail. It's that they had no way of knowing. Like, things can happen without you accounting for them because they just happen naturally. Like, you can't fight nature. It's not possible. Anyway, next point. Point 4. Penny. Okay, buckle up, y'all. This one's going to be interesting. So in the finale, Penny makes the decision of helping Team RWBY fight Cinder instead of going to Vacuo, which ended with Penny's death, and transferring the Winter Maiden powers to Winter. This decision makes complete sense if you know anything about Penny's character. Since Volume 1, the beginning of the entire series, Penny was shown to be someone who would defend her friends no matter the consequences. When Roman Torchwick attacked RWBY at the docks, she didn't hesitate to step in and take out the two jets with one attack, even though she knew her father didn't want her to be seen or use her powers. Also, Vex fails to mention the reason why Penny went back to fight Cinder. Penny went back because she heard Blake yell Yang's name after Yang fell. All Penny knew was that Blake yelled a name, so she assumed something happened and intervened, which is perfectly in line with her character. Of course, her decision ended in her death, but that doesn't diminish her efforts or her bravery in the face of adversity. Penny in particular is a character that I myself really connected with since her introduction in Volume 1, and seeing her come back made me very happy. And it sucks that people watch the show and watch the narrative that's happening on screen and see her as nothing but a plot device, a stepping stone for the main cast to use and then forget about, because that's not what Penny is. From Volume 2, she was foreshadowed to be this great defender of the world and to have a greater purpose, and I believe in Volume 8 she served that purpose. Whether or not you agree with the conclusion that happened on screen, it is the decision that they came up with, and it shouldn't be diminished because you yourself did not like it. Okay, next point. Point 5. The Happy Huntresses. Vex states that the Happy Huntress is not helping Team RWBY fight Cinder after the initial explosion. However, that would serve absolutely no purpose. This is a similar situation to Chapter 2, when the Hound first attacked Team Jolly, or Jean, Oscar, Ren, and Yang. A lot of people, Vexed included, complained that them not doing more to stop the Hound from taking Oscar was stupid or contrived or whatever, but in reality, they tried to help initially and realized that 1, it was going to use Oscar as a human shield and he would have been injured, and 2, was way stronger than any of them. So what purpose would continually throwing themselves into a fight do when they could do little to nothing to stop it? The answer is, it wouldn't. Same thing with the Happy Huntresses. Their main priority from Chapter 1, hell, even from Volume 7, was the citizens of Mantle first and foremost. So if you're escorting a bunch of people that have no combat experience and suddenly an explosion happens nearby, what would your reaction be? You would want to focus on the task at hand, which is minimize casualties, meaning you are laser focused on evacuation first and foremost. Also, as fucked up as it is, that wasn't the Happy Huntresses' fight. They had absolutely no reason to step into a conflict in the middle of a high-stress situation where they were already focused on a mission that they were trying to achieve for weeks on end. They were going to do their job first and foremost, and if they were able to help afterwards, they would have. Of course, we know that the portal to Vacuo is closed once you step through it, so they couldn't have gone back to help. But again, going back to the Penny point, it makes sense when you know their characters and their motivations and what they've been doing since they've been introduced, which is protect the people first. And that's it. Moving on. Next point. Point 6. Neo and Yang. Oh, this point in particular, has annoyed me to no end since Chapter 13 released. Chapter 13 is... I'll get into it. We'll talk about it. This point in particular, between Neo and Yang, has been parroted so many goddamn times by people who seemingly live to just point out every single issue that they have with the narrative, because for some reason they picture the narrative in their head, and if it doesn't go point for point the way they think it should, it's deemed as worthless trash, not worthy of consumption. It's just throw it away, not good. Don't use it, okay? Don't use it. And let me clarify again. I can understand that RWBY has problems with its writing. RWBY is not a perfect show. There is no show in existence that has perfect writing. Shows have highs and lows. But for you to sit here and claim to be this person of criticism and someone who genuinely wants the product to improve, you talk about the good and the bad. But if you do 90% bad things and 10% good things, you can't use the 10% as ammunition of like, oh, I don't just talk about bad things. Yes, but 9 times out of 10, you do talk about bad things, and that's the things that people latch onto because they want people to agree with them that that the problems that they believe exist in the show actually do exist. But I digress. Anyway, moving on back to the point of Neo and Yang. Let's start with Neo, because I have a lot to say about Yang. So Vex states that Neo waiting for Cinder to attack was pointless, as well as her being disguised but having the lamp on her waist, making her disguise pointless. I will actually agree with him and say that yes, her being disguised while also still having the relic on her person and visible was stupid. However, her waiting for Cinder to attack first before she made her attack makes perfect sense, again, if you consider Neo's entire motivation as a character. For the better part of a year, all Neo wanted to do was get revenge on Ruby Rose for the death of Roman Torchwick. That is all she has wanted since she's been introduced. So when the opportunity finally comes up, she wanted to make sure it would actually happen. Ergo, sneak attack. Sneak attacks are almost guaranteed to work. Sometimes they don't, which is in this case it didn't work. But if you want guaranteed, I want you dead, a sneak attack makes perfect sense. You don't charge in blindly and alert them to your intentions. You get the job done and you move on. So that makes perfect sense for why Neo did what she did. The disguise thing, again, I will agree, was stupid. But anyway. And now we're on to Yang. And let me before I get fully into the explanation of Yang, I am not exaggerating when I say that Yang falling off of that platform has to be the most divisive thing to happen in the RWBY fandom since the death of Adam Taurus. And I am not exaggerating when I say that. The opinions of Yang falling and the attempts, or rather lack thereof, of trying to save her have split the fandom in a way that I have not seen again since Adam died. And it is infuriating to see both sides of this when it is very obvious what is happening, and I will explain. But for Vexed in particular, his main point in the video was RWBY. I love that we finally got an explanation for RWBY's semblance in this volume, but I hate, and I really, really, really hate that because we have that explanation now, it is used as ammunition against any decision Ruby Rose will make afterwards in every episode after Volume 8, Chapter 3. Because we got that explanation, every decision that Ruby Rose makes, which she doesn't use her semblance, is like, oh, she's incompetent, she's stupid, she's a badly written character. No. Just because she has the thing doesn't mean the thing will always work. We'll get into it. We'll get into it. Let me remind you of how the scene is presented to the audience of Yang falling. Ready? Watch this. Did you notice anything? The scene is in slow motion, meaning we have no idea how fast Yang began to descend after falling over the ledge. Blake attempts to save her, but the ribbon on Gamble's shroud was too short. So even if RWBY attempted to save Yang, she would have needed to already be using her semblance when Yang cleared the platform. Which, again, we don't know how fast everything happened because it was presented in slow motion for dramatic effect. Jumping right off of that, well, let's move on to the last point that Vex made, which was Winter. Vex makes a similar argument for Winter not saving Weiss because glyphs. Because the Schnee family can use glyphs. Why didn't Winter use a glyph to stop Weiss from falling? I literally just explained with RWBY. We don't know if it would have worked. Winter began flying towards Jean and Weiss the second she noticed what Cinder was doing. While flying, the explosion goes off and Weiss falls. We don't see how close she was to the bridge before Weiss fell, so even if the attempt was made, there was no guarantee that that was going to work. There was nothing in the scene that said she was close enough for that to work. Moving on to Jean, Vex also questions why she didn't help Jean through the portal and stated that it had no logic and it was only set up to Jean with Team RWBY next volume. However, the scene literally shows us Winter yelling at Cinder, turning around, and beelining it for the portal without looking back. It was only until the portal started closing which Jean started to run. And it wasn't until Winter was already almost through the doorway that she noticed what was happening, but it was already too late and she got pulled in. So, there was no way for her to know that because she didn't look. She didn't know that it was happening. So she was beelining it for the portal to get to safety and to get to where everybody else was without checking what was happening behind her. Granted, does it make sense for her to just fly off and let him walk by himself? Of course not. She could have just picked him up and brought him. But to say that it has no logic is not true, because the way the scene is presented literally tells you point for point. Cinder flies back to Atlas, she creates something with the staff, the portals start closing, Jean starts running. It's not until she's already through the doorway that Winter turns around and sees that it's closing, but it's already too late. It's literally in the scene. It literally shows you point for point what is happening. It shows you. But anyway, in conclusion, logic does, in fact, exist in RWBY if you only, look for it. And, not look at everything through a cynical lens and try your absolute best to find anything wrong with the scene. Because guess what? If you watch a show expecting to find things to complain about, you're gonna find things to complain about because you're already in the mindset of this is gonna be bad. I'm not gonna like this. So yeah, you're gonna find things that you don't like because you're not looking for the things you do like. How are you gonna find something you're not looking for? It's not gonna happen. It's not. Especially, this is a thing that is very specific to Vexed and to Team Frostbite, or not Team Frostbite in general, but between Vexed and Fat Man Falling, where only the current, I believe Fat Man said that only the current volume is canon, and then Vexed changed it to only the current scene is canon. Which, that's a whole problem on itself, but whatever, that's fine. I also know that a lot of people will see this video and say, why are you putting so much effort into talking about somebody else's opinions? Or to try to devalue somebody else's opinions. To that, I respond, it's because I honestly don't believe that people that have this out view on RWBY are not watching the same show that other people are. I believe that when they watch the show, they are not experiencing the same things that are on their screen as I do. Because, I've tried my best. Since, like, Volume 5, I have tried my absolute best to see how people could arrive at the conclusions they do when they try to criticize the show, and I can't find the logic. I cannot put two and two together to see how you could have possibly come to that conclusion. I've tried for like 3 years. I have yet to find it. I doubt I will ever find it, which is why I'm doing this. Also, it's because when responding to people like Vexed or CJ or anybody else who's overly critical of the show, you can only say so much in a tweet or a comment or anything like that. In a video format, I can fully explain all of my points, all of my viewpoints, and all the things that I see as either incorrect or something that needs more explaining to further understand the logic of the scene. I can only do that in a video because in a video I have as much time as I put into it. So, that's it. Again, I will repeat, also, RWBY's not a perfect show. Not by any means. But RWBY is also a show that does not deserve some of the criticism that it receives. People will harp over and over and over and over again about the same talking points over and over again of like, oh, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. It's like, I get it. You don't like the direction of the show. You don't like certain aspects of the show. Please understand that, like, if you continue to talk about something, and then people call you out on it saying, oh, you only say bad things about the show, and then you say, no, I'm actually a fan of the show. Half of your, 85% of your content is just you shitting on the show. What conclusion am I supposed to come to? How am I supposed to know you're a fan of something if you just say, this is bad, 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 this is bad. And, like, once in a blue moon, like, oh, okay, that was good. Oh, that was good. It's like, to me, that comes across as somebody who genuinely does not like the show in any regard. But anyway, if you enjoyed this, I have other people that I can talk about as well. There are several people in the fandom that have had takes like this that I can also talk about. Also, regarding Vexed, I just want to say, if you are watching this, if you cared enough to click on this, this was not a dig at you personally as a person. I do not think you are vindictive. I do not think you are a terrible person. I am not going to even comment on anything like that because I do not know you as a person. I am only talking about your viewpoints on a piece of media that I love with my entire heart and being, and your viewpoints on them because I do not believe in everything that you say, because I've seen your streams before. I know you've talked about you used to be a very hardcore fan of the show back in volumes 1, 2, and 3, and then volume 4 happened and you were disappointed. I get it. And I understand that now you point out everything that you believe is that they're doing wrong, that the show could be doing better. But even after this video, even after you see this, even if you do see this, if you care enough to see this, I highly doubt that me talking about you for however long this video is will change your mind at all. I highly doubt that. And I wasn't expecting to either, because that's not realistic. You have had these viewpoints for years, and one video is not going to change that. But for everyone out there who doesn't understand the logic of certain things in RWBY, I am your go-to. I will explain it for you, and I have other plans as well for things in the future that I can dissect and talk about. If you watched all the way to the end, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I don't know how long this video is, but I'm pretty sure it's long. Vexed, if you also are still watching for some reason, if you actually cared to watch all the way to the end, again, I did not make this to attack you personally or anything like that. This was made because I do not agree with your outlook on the show, and I wanted to elaborate on things that you talked about in your video. I'm going to make another RWBY video very soon, where I talk about Ironwood and the one detail the fanbase overlooked when discussing his sudden character shift. And people who are critical of the show's insistence that his character shift made no sense. It makes sense. You're forgetting something, and I will explain it very soon. Until then, stay safe and stay lovely.